gonna welcome everybody to the Brothers Podcast. This is pretty special for us. We've been trying to do a podcast for a minute, but unfortunately, we did lose one brother. So this podcast is pretty much the Brothers Podcast. This is gonna be the episode. We're still four. When life changes, brotherhood does. So pretty much two here. We have two brothers beyond, but we're forever brothers. So we're gonna start out just simple, and of course, it's my older brother Chris. So what's going on, bro?
What up, boy? What's the word?
So the thing is, man, hey, when life isn't what we thought it would be, we never expected to kind of be at the position we are in now, especially to be able to see different successes that we have. We expected everybody to be here at the time. So my first question to you, and we talk about it all the time, but I would like the listeners to kind of understand when you look at our lives today compared to what you thought life would look like 10 to 15 years ago, or even 20 years ago. What did you see?
Us getting older, being in our own worlds, but having our worlds collide. I know what I think about a lot of times is when crazy is I think I had a glimpse of what I wanted our lives to be. You probably remember this, but you remember we used to when you first moved up here, Shanda was up here in Kansas City and then Chip. And then we had all those family get togethers. We are here, we were all around each other all the time. And that was a glimpse of what I expected to be. We all had our own families. Our kids would play together. There's one picture I think we're staying in Grandview. I think me and Sean was, and we're playing football in the backyard. I don't know if you remember that or not. And Chip was hiking the ball. I was a quarterback and you were on the other side.
Yeah. I remember that. Yeah.
So that was what, I expected us to be 20 years ago. We were there, and everybody got older and kind of moved away. And I always stayed here. I felt like, me staying in Kansas City was always home for any of you guys. That you guys know that when y'all pop up here, there's a room upstairs. You don't even have to ask. I damn near got a key, so that's what my expectation was. I think I seen it, what I expected 20 years ago us to be where that maybe about 5 or 6, 10 years ago, when we had those experiences.
And especially for me, man, I think for me it's just it's crazy because, I look up to y'all all the time and it's always like you want to be like your big brothers, and I follow all y'all around in different ways. So that was always my thing to be looking at today, that my big brothers here, I'm still kind of following them and just kind of being able to, be on y'all leg, just kind of, hey, what we got next? What we doing next type deal. And it's unfortunate. And it's been crazy that that's not even a possibility no more.
Yeah, it's tough. I think, as we're not the only brothers for sure that experience loss, and we're definitely not the first and we definitely won't be the last. But when it hits home, it hits home. So I think a lot of times, when you go through stuff like this, reflection is it. I told somebody, it feels like losing Chip. It's almost feel like that Sonic Hedgehog game, and he's going real fast, real fast. And when life hits him, all his coins come out. That's kind of what it's like. Like you get hit and then all the memories come out, right? And you're trying to gather those now. And I think that's the hardest part is because, all the memories came out, we got hit, and all those coins came out. And I feel like I'm gathering memories, and it's the hardest part because with Chip, Michael was hard for sure. Losing Michael was hard, losing Chip makes it even harder because we experienced so much in our adulthood together. He moved up here with me and all that stuff. So what that means is a lot more coins that came out when we got hit because there's a lot more memories made. So I really attribute our memories to like those Sonic the Hedgehog coins. And when you get hit, they always come out and you're always going back remembering certain things because that's all you have left. You can't create no more coins. So you got to capture the ones that get shattered that you made. And that's kind of how I attribute how I'm kind of dealing with it. That's the only way I can visualize it for people. When you get hit, sometimes all those memories just come out and you're doing your best to capture them and keep them. That's kind of how I see it.
Yeah. And I want to go back a little even further because we've been through so much, and from even talking I have a block half the time when it comes to things that's happened in life. So a lot of times I come to you or come to one of the other siblings or somebody in the family and just kind of refresh it up. Even Chip was big on knowing a lot of memories. But when mom passed, like, I like to go into that because we had our discussion the other day. Like we talked about, remember seeing her in the bathtub with dad just before that happened. And I remember certain things, but you said something clear, like I was behind you, pushed me out the way. And it's funny when you said that because I remember being moved, but that memory jogged me saying, hey, it was you that kind of pushed back behind us. So can you just go into that a little bit?
Yeah, losing mom was tough. Just to kind of give some context around that story. Mama was sick. She was diagnosed with cancer. She had 11 month stint. She had 7 kids. I was the second oldest. Michael was the oldest, and Joe was the youngest boy. And Joe, for me, was always, to this day, I always call, and I'm about to do it now. I always call Joe Logan, and Logan's my son, and I call Logan Joe because Joe is like my first son. Like you was like my first son. I everywhere when we played in band, I had you with me, and I was always overly protective of you. But the moment you're talking about is 2 days from mom died when the ambulance came to the house to pick her up. I don't want to go in the whole part of that story. I think we'll do that later. But there's something particular with you about mama that impacted a lot of my life. And I might have told you this before, but just going back to the story of when mama was taken to the hospital. She was in the bathroom. There's firefighters there, paramedics was there. It was all 7 of us at the time. She had 7 kids, and we were all in this little hallway. You got called back to the house because somebody told us the ambulance was at our house. So we get back to the house. All of us kind of piled in a little hallway trying to see what was going on with mama. Mom was in the bathroom, bent over the toilet stool. I think she was throwing up blood at the time, but she was bad off. And as kids, I think I was 15. Joe, you had to be about 7. Yeah, because about 7. And I remember us all trying to grab in the crowd in the hallway to see what's going on. And I could see mom in the bathroom on the toilet. I could see her. I could see a paramedic behind her. And I could see 2 firefighters beside her. And when you came in, you were behind me. I remember shielding you behind me, and you was trying to peek around and see what happened. I kept holding you behind me because there was just a lot of people in the hallway with paramedics and stuff. But you said something that I didn't realize that you were saying. That I just remember people when we talked the other day. You said you remember people in the bathtub. And I had to think about it. I was like, who's in the bathtub? But I remember the firefighters were standing in the bathtub over because they needed room in there. So that's why they were standing in the bathtub. Mama would die. I think 2 days after that, we get called to the hospital, and they called us to the hospital, and they told us that we can say our goodbyes. But when we saw our goodbyes, I think when they're one by one, they were just keeping her alive. And I remember, so we can say our goodbyes. I remember the main thing I remember seeing mama in that state was she had a tear in her eye. And I always wondered if she was crying because she was losing us or she weren't going to be here for us. But that's what I remember the most about mama's, death, and seeing her, is that she had a crusted tear in her eye. And yep, that's the last memory of, just seeing mama. But, we'll probably get into that later. But what's important about, loss is that how it affects you at certain times. And I think I told the story to you maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. But specifically how it affects me, I was 15 at the time. I figured I was a mama's boy, so I was with her all the time. Grocery store, cooking, all that stuff. I was always with her. So it's about a year or so after mama had died. I remember your room was down the hall from me and Michael's room. Your room was down the hall. And I remember going past the room, hearing you crying. I was like, man, what is wrong? And so I went in your room looking for you. I couldn't find you. And you were in the closet. You're in the closet crying. And I remember I said, Joe, what's wrong with you? I didn't understand like why you was crying and what was going on. And you said, I miss mama. And at 15, I can really register. I was like, you know, I'm sure he knows mama, but he didn't know mama like I knew mama. How could he be missing her? Like I was that naive to understand that you had at 7, that the impact she had in your life at 7. And I remember thinking that way. I remember pulling you out the closet, and I kept you around me all the time. And I was like, Joe, get over it, type, not get over it, but like, all right, Joe, shake it off, whatever. And I was thinking in my head that, he can't be hurting as much as I'm hurting. And as a big brother, that was one of the things that my job was, all right, man, shake out of it. But I remember I remember as I got older, I started to understand why. But that was about a year later, I think. And that's another part of it, is that was a year later, he was still affected by it. And what's so crazy is that had to be my sophomore year, because that was my freshman year when she died. I didn't have that moment you had. You had your moment early. I had my moment missing mama on my graduation night senior year, 4 years later. That's when it hit me. Like I was getting ready to walk across stage. I remember sitting in that hallway in my class, and I was sitting there crying, just broken. There's some issues that happened with my tickets to graduation, all that stuff, whatever that had something to do with it.
Have you move into the camera real quick?
Oh, am I not on the camera?
There you are, right there.
Yeah. So I did have some issues with my tickets to graduation, so I didn't have any, And I remember getting into it, with my dad and all that stuff. And I remember during graduation how I wish Mama was here. It was 4 years after she had passed. She passed November 14th, my freshman year, and then it took my senior year with me graduating for me to have the moment you had of how bad I missed her. I'm not saying I didn't miss her before then. I had my issues, but that really impact like, dang, Mama's gone. I need her right now type moment happened my senior year, and that's when I understood how you felt. That time I saw you in the class. And you just, you grieve different. I think, everybody grieves different. Everybody has their times and their moments, but that's Mama's story. Ironically, about my graduation, nobody was able to go to graduation. I think I didn't have any tickets, but when I graduated and I walked across stage, I knew anybody, I didn't know who was there for my side. But when I looked in the stands, it was Michael at the top of the stands. My older brother, Michael, was hands waving like I'm here. He had graduated a year early, so he got some tickets from somebody, our mutual friend. So he showed it for me, but, and then I would lose him, we would lose him, 6 years ago. But, losses is a tough deal, losing Mama kind of started the trend, if you call it that. I hate to say that, but we have to be resilient for those around us, and we have to be resilient for those that depend on us. So
I think that even going from that to, like you said, it's sad to say like a trend, like it's we've been kind of just in a space of we can't really gather words because of everything right now. Everything's going on. Like you said, with Michael being gone 6 years ago, and now it's just with Chip just as recent as last month. It's changed the way I've kind of let people approach me, or even I approach different people. It's more so, when Mike passed, we talked even more. We always talked a lot, but we talked more when Mike passed. Now Chip gone, we talked even more. And it's like, well, what was it, like an hour before, hour, 2 hours before he's texting, and then something happens, and we didn't. And I think about is we talk about like, what was he thinking about, man? The way he was murdered, gasping for air, and I can only think if it was me. The first thing I would want to think is like, man, I gotta tell my family, I gotta tell my brothers, I gotta tell my sisters,
yeah,
tell my dad, I gotta tell them what's going on,
yeah.
and that's what eats me up when it was this whole thing. And same thing with Michael, same situation. I know he was. If I can just tell them something of what's going on, but that didn't happen. So I guess in a sense, with both brothers, like I said, me and you at the memorial, like we talked about before, you said it's just me and you now. So what is that? How has that changed the way you treat people who are still here?
It's weird because, like, I said it, I turned 50 the day after he passed, rather. And I remember telling myself, I'm gonna be an old grumpy man. I'm gonna turn to an old grumpy man. I know I've been telling you guys because I'm
Yeah,
usually, yeah. I said I'm gonna turn to an old grumpy man anyway. And what I meant by that is not really being grumpy, but just not letting things get to me anymore. Right, I'm on my downhill swing, right, of life. And this happens, it becomes just a harder push towards answers, and just a harder push to stay away from BS, and just getting right to things that benefits me and the family. So just cut out all the BS now, and I see it now more clearly than ever before, because life is so precious. You can't waste your time around BS. And I went through a lot of stuff, and Chip was a big part of helping me get through there, and vice versa. So not having him now, and we have family and people that depend on us even more so. Because I think about what he left behind. Trey, his son, Danny, stays with me. And I just see his eyes, the hurt that he has, and you got to be strong for them. I think I've always told it. When I lost CJ, I said my son CJ, I was like, I had lived my life. Even at that time, I would have gave everything to him. Because I felt like I didn't have much more to offer. It's dang 15 years later, I've done a lot more in life. But I think if I had just been more focused on, what's here today, and less on what I can, how many people I can keep involved, how many friends I can keep, how many relationships that's not important I should, filter through. The filter's gone. It's like I got who I got, and I need who I need, and that's it. And it's not being mean at all. It's just not wasting time. Time is so precious. And I'll tell you this, is that she was the closest thing to me as far as age, and just mimics me, right? And I was thinking about if God saw fit that, Chip has served his time, how much different is my time? What more do I have to offer? And that's a real question I was asking myself, that he can go in such a way he went. That evil can take somebody that's trying to do all the right things, and there's so many people out here that's just living just to be living without
Yeah.
purpose, and those are the things I just have no more patience for, that part of it.
I think for me, like even with trying to move forward, man, I feel like sometimes I have that survivor's guilt. Like we always talk about Michael. Michael was like, shoot, he was clean when doing this. I like, man, shoot, he was just doing all the right stuff. Chip is doing all his pastors doing everything the right way, we all doing the right way. And it's like now, it's like, man, shoot, like you just said, if he can be taken, like,
Yeah.
and so I had that mentality, and I try to work myself out of it. But it's a real thing, man. It's like it's real PTSD. It's real. Like I'm watching my back. I'm talking to somebody. I'm catching words. If it sounds too similar to what I think may disrupt or take it to that spot, I gotta walk away from it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like I didn't even realize this, but I was talking to one of my business partners. I was like, it's hard for me to stay in the house, and I was outside just finding something to do. I go on rides and drive. It was tough after ship passed to stay in the house, and I just couldn't sit in the house, especially down here in my office downstairs. And it was just hard for me just to stay in the house. I had to get away. And one of my business partners told me, he said, "Chris, that's trauma." And I didn't understand why. It took me 2 days to realize why. And what it was is that Chip got murdered in his house upstairs. And where I am, is just one way out of my basement here, right? Just one way out of my office, and I felt trapped, right, just mentally. And I really had to teach myself mentally, like, Chris, all right, they got to come to your front door, come to your garage to get here, but it was really you know just unconscious trauma that you have, that I had to tell myself, Chris, you can sit in your office, you're fine, whatever. So you just don't know how things affect you, right? That was one of the things that I had to get past first, right? That, oh, Chris, you're in your house, you should be safe in your house. And Chip wasn't, right? And I mean, that's the biggest thing, is that Chip he was a protector ball. He kept guns. He was taking me shooting, forcing me to get different guns and stuff like that. But for him not to be safe in his own house is a traumatic, outcome of this that I didn't know, that I didn't expect, that I would feel unsafe at home because of what he went through. But I had to really tell myself that, Chris, you're at home, you're safe. This doesn't happen all the time. What happened to him is a rarity, right? And but you got to tell yourself that because it happened, So that's some of the trauma that I'm kind of working through. I can't remember the question, but shit, that's where it got
Nah,
to. And shit is
nah, that's
shit is a legal term.
exactly. It's like, and so y'all don't know, we sound alike, but he cursed, I don't.
Yeah.
So that's the only way we can tell each other apart when we listen
On
to recordings.
recordings, yeah, for real.
So, so the thing is, like saying with yours trauma, man, like it's a lot with me, and I think it's more so. I've always had trust issues, but it's definitely like I just can't take it. I have patience for if I see it, you got to go. I can't even deal with it. It's no issue necessarily with most people, but I just see the worst now rather than seeing the best like this. Like I
Yeah.
see it quick. It's like I ain't got time for it. Like if it's not benefiting the family or this and that, I'm not even gonna waste my time.
The world's evil, man. It's like I keep, Armand said something. Shout out to Armand. Like he called me and he said that he had heard somebody say is that, death is not bad when you're right with God. It's the way that it happened. It's a sin that makes it evil. All right. It's a sin that makes it bad, right? How it happened. But Chip is in a better place for who he was and what he did. But the mechanism that took him there is what we questioned. And I thought when he said that, it made me kind of think back on some of the way I see life and see how death works. I mean, it doesn't make it no easier, but it puts it in perspective, right? That no matter how bad it went, the outcome of him being with Mama and Michael and CJ and the rest of the family is a positive thing for him, but we are fighting over the mechanism that took him there, and
Yeah,
that's
and I
the
want
hardest
to
part.
yeah, and I want to interrupt that just because people I know we're talking about a lot, but just so people know we're not, man, how we're talking, how we are. We've always had things going. But can you talk about how Michael and Chip were murdered so that it kind of get a little bit more context?
Yeah, so I'll put it this way, is that we've never been around gun violence, right? We grew up in a military home. Our dad made sure we took that we were well taken care of, suburban type kids. So we're never around the gun violence, right? The statistics part of that, right? So even though it wasn't around the gun violence, we've been introduced to the violence of guns, right? In the most horrific way. And I think my brother Michael losing his life, going to buy an iPhone for his daughter is what we were told. He got an hour outside of his home, his home, to go purchase his iPhone, and he was found murdered the next day. I think there was money in his wallet. He wasn't robbed or any of that stuff, but it looks like the bullet, he was shot in his back. I think it said 38. I can't remember, but it looks like the bullet just ricocheted off his shoulder blades throughout his body, hit his heart, and killed him. And we were able to see those let go messages. I think that was the name of the app, right? Was it let go?
Yeah. Let go, yeah.
Yeah. So we're able to see those let go messages. And in the messages, you can read where the group of people, whoever it was telling him where to go. And he traveled from Columbus, Mississippi to Bessemer, Alabama. I think that's 45 minutes, yeah. 45 minutes or so. To pick up this iPhone, you can see them messaging Mike saying, hey, we're at this house. Look at this location. Yeah, got to Birmingham. Was it Birmingham first? Or yeah, Birmingham first, and then he was supposed to be in there. Then they told him to travel a little bit further to Bessemer. It was a little further east, of Birmingham. But so when he got there, we could see a text message where the guy is telling him, "Hey, I'm not at this house. I'm at this house. Look at the man on the lawnmower." So he's describing a location. So
and I'm going to talk, and even with the text message, so that way I know we're going to go in there. We're not trying to. This case is quote unquote done. It's not. It's still an investigation for us because it's not true. But those messages, if anybody has been in their group with a friend, siblings, loved ones, you know how text messages sound. And when we're talking about messages, we can tell when the shift it wasn't him and somebody taking over for him. I just wanted to put that out there because.
Yeah. Yeah. Like you said, we investigated this thing of Michael's death. Leading with Chip was a ringleader, right? From start to finish, from the day he messaged the guy for the phone, who he talked to, that we could see from the let go message. So we got access that fast. We never had access to his phone. We never had access to any messages outside of the let go messaging app. We were just able to get into his emails and see all of the messages that he had. And John, even know how we pulled that off, but we're able to see that. Yeah, I'll get into that, and we saw the direction that he was being led. There was some misguided things that happened at the beginning of that were told certain things that wasn't exactly accurate, similar in Chip's case, So it made our antennas go up, but we battled that for 6 years. There's a boy in custody, underage. He's there.
15,
yeah, so
15 at a time.
Yeah.
And he said Mike's body got moved multiple times. The truck got moved, and he said a 15-year-old did over that. So
yeah, and it's just no way possible. I could see just one person doing all the stuff we've seen, but hey, it is at this point what they're telling us, and the wheels of justice somehow, they'll find their way to the truth, one way or another. It's kind of how we see it. But that was a hard space, I think, for Chip, and all of us for sure. To the point, you made a statement earlier, is that Michael's case bothered Chip so much that literally, I think about 45 minutes before he died, he texts about Michael. Michael's on his mind. He had sent us a text, our sibling group, about That's What Friends Are For with Stevie Wonder and who is it? Whitney Houston. And yeah, he had sent us that text and said, this song reminds me of Michael and Mama. And who would have known 40 minutes later, this would happen to him. But I think Michael's death was something that traumatized all of us. We were on the scene. We were flying back and forth to Bessemer, to Birmingham, trying to figure out what was going on. And, we still don't have full answers. I think, it's been, time has passed and that wound has never healed. And for us to be here again is just crazy. Like for Chip, and just jumping on Chip, they have his alleged shooter, but we've heard so many stories, man. Like so many stories, and we know Chip. No Chip. And a lot of the stuff isn't adding up for us either, but the wheels of justice will turn. I think, we've been blocked on a lot of stuff. We've been told that, and I'm just really going there, that we're not allowed to have any information on the case. We being the siblings, that was blocked by the wife and all this stuff, whatever. So from that standpoint too, you know where Chip's head was, what was going on there. And I don't, I'm past 50 now. I won't let up. I'm not going to just we're just not going to just sit back and just let things go. Cause somebody let him in the house. The boy had a vendetta, on Chip. So after losing Michael, what I've learned, what I've learned is that, you say what it is, what you feel and what you think, whatever. You let the wheels of justice turn. But at the same time, you can't be silent on BS that you see, So, and I just hate it for Chip because I think Chip was doing the best he can to be the best father, you know
Yeah.
up until the day before, this happened. First thing he told me was that, he got his daughter for a whole year, I'm sorry, for the rest of the summer. And he wanted to see what he could do to help her to get her stuff together, right? So to speak. And she was getting ready to go in her senior year and all that stuff. All that's changed now, but
Yeah. And Chris,
that,
like I don't want to get into it, but I want to specifically, how was he? If you can talk about just how he was murdered, shot.
yeah, I don't, I can, when I would say this, and this is that he was found outside his daughter's bedroom. From what we can tell, it's like about 7 shots, 4 center mass. And what I could surmise by that is that he wasn't standing when all those shots went into him. No. So take it for what I won't get too much into the case beyond that too. I'll leave that. But that's a level of aggression that's for somebody that he didn't know, right? To do that type of aggression. I think they said they found weed on or whatever, but weed don't give you that aggression. Something put a batter in his back, or someone, or some conversation, or some thought put a batter in this boy's back to be the monster that they're proclaiming him to be. And I think he is, right? He murdered my brother, but he didn't rob him, he didn't sneak into the house, So there's a lot of questions that we have, right? We know a lot of issues that Chip had, with just dealing with the family situation too, that just don't add up. And I know there's a lot that's being, said and portrayed, but man, Chip had a lot of issues, a lot of issues dealing with the family situation that he had. So I don't know the truth. I don't know. I'm hearing a lot of stories. We're hearing a lot of stories, but what I can tell you is that it is not adding up to me, knowing Chip and just knowing how he is, how protected he is. The stories don't add up. They change. They don't make sense. But at the end of the day, I was saying this earlier, is that nothing's going to bring Chip back. And I don't even know if I have, the strength, to fight and grieve at the same time,
Exactly.
and I don't know. The grieving process has been hard for me. And we've lost a lot, but this one hits. It feels like I got a broken heart. Like it's a different hurt.
Yeah,
That
I can't even. It's like it's sad 'cause like I said, I can't. We talk about it all the time, man. I can't even cry. I'm like at an angry stage.
Yeah,
I've cried so much. It's just anger at this point.
yeah. And I'm breaking down to WalMarts and stuff. I know my wife is wondering like when he's gonna get past this. But like usually I'd be talking to Chip or texting. He'd be in our text group saying something.
Yeah,
And our text group was silent mainly because he was always his
yeah,
crazy butt sending something stupid.
yeah.
Like it's just hard, man. I just like I don't know what answers I'm even looking for. I just know that it ain't making sense, and nothing happens is gonna bring shit back. And that's all I want. They can take everything else, just bring Chip back. Because when I talked to him last, he was excited about just him being in control of his life. And there was a lot that he went through a lot. I know there was time when he weren't working. There was stuff going on when he was moving so much that he had to find a new job when he moved and trying to get stabilized and there was a lot that he was dealing with. And when I talked to him the day before he passed, it was like the first time in a long time he had together. He didn't want to pay that. He didn't. What bill he was paying? It was a Jack and Jill. It was one of those.
Jack and Jill. Yeah.
Yeah, he was mad about paying that bill, that Jack and Jill bill. Because he wanted to do other stuff. But that was one of the things that I remember, and that's a whole nother story, right? That bothers me, right? I think for mental health and kids, what Jack and Jill does, I know we have it here in Kansas City, is supposed to be able to put an impact on kids, right? To where they see something better. I think Chip did that for his kids and put them in that situation to where they can be better, or be in a good space, and to have this happen to him with this type of boy in the house, to take him out company doesn't make sense, right? It doesn't make sense. Even like, the Brothers of Kappa, I said that too, is that the guy right part of the program we have, Chip was involved with that stuff too. And for him to be gone when he did all the right things for kids, it doesn't add up. And I think those are the things that bother me, that keep me up, is that you go through life trying to position yourself and your kids to be the best part of themselves, right? To tap into the best part of themselves. And to see him go out this way, and to be honest with you, he was sidetracked. There's no way his guard was down because his guard was down, and that part eats me up. Eats me up to the end. And you know Chip like I know Chip. Chip's antennas are up all the time,
all the time. Yeah,
all the time. Like it's
and that's
like, yeah,
and that's what I talk about just with this thing is I was talking about patterns, man. What pattern change? And like I said, just patterns stay the same. So then you just kind of, without digging deeper in, just saying what patterns change throughout the whole thing, and that's kind of where we put our focus on, like where did the patterns shift, and that'll tell you all the answers.
yeah, yeah. And I think for us, and I think God, are we on a podcast? I guess we gotta talk.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We're just trying to talk. We just kind of talking, but I'm down for whatever,
Yeah.
But I'll say this: I don't like the way he's being presented either. Right? As that part to me is just tearing me up inside. Even when the first thing came out that the story was like he let a boy in or he allowed him to come in, or that was the first part of the movie hearing that he was protecting his daughter and all this stuff, whatever. But I don't even know how true that is. Right? I think from what it looks like, he got blindsided, when he is what it looks like, I don't know. Again, that's what the stories are. But the first things first, if you guys don't know Chip, that dude, whoever you see, would not be nowhere near
Nowhere
house.
near. Yeah. Not at all.
Not at all. So if anybody's going to understand, you was allowing that around, man. I saw all those messages out there, and it was let to be lived that he was, just let the boy in and let his daughter have a boyfriend. Man, ain't none of that happened.
None of that.
None of that. Chip done walked in houses to get his daughter
Chip,
out of right.
Yeah, Chip's taking the door off her daughter's room
off the hinges. Off the hinges. Like that stuff that he doesn't play that at all. And I think that was hard from the start. And I don't think anybody tried to correct that. And nobody, and you care, we worry about, my grief is my grief. I deal with it too. But only thing Chip has left is memory, right? And nobody's perfect for sure. But that part of the watch people talk about him being an allowing father, that was not the case at all. So I think that was corrected, out the gate, but there's just so much that just doesn't make sense. And the world, once we've talked with the detective, kind of shut us down. I mentioned that before. Like, we're not supposed to get any information. Well, apparently we're detriment to the case for asking questions, but ain't nobody gonna love Chip more than we do. And ain't nobody gonna fight harder for him. Because I'm gonna tell you, we're not even guessing what he would do. He has showed us. When we lost Michael, he was the same way. And I will tell you this, is that if it was me, if it was something happened to me or us, shit would be down here in Kansas City tearing over every rock. Right? To make sure he got to the answer. And we keep looking at this little boy. Man, for somebody to get murdered like that, to have that much hate and animosity, it just doesn't make sense, right? He was already down to have that much hate. There's more to it, right? I mean, just the gruesomeness of it. I can't, just unsee that. We were able to see his body through pictures, and until we saw his body, it was a week later, we didn't understand the veracity of the attack, but it is. I'm open book, man. Like, there's certain people I think, like, I was able to go down there and say my goodbye to him in person, and to see him and just to see the atmosphere, because I'm not from there, I don't know anything, but to read the atmosphere in the room, Chip may do it what it is, but even the atmosphere was different, right? I think it was more, it wasn't celebratory. I don't feel like it was celebratory for him, it was more supporting. It was a support mechanism. And that part hurts the most because Chip was so much more, and he's done so much more. So that was one of the things that really bothered me, about just losing him. It wasn't just losing him, but it's the way, the things kind of play out. And like, God only knows, the truth. God can only unpack that, but I'm just hope the wheels of justice keep churning, right? In the right direction. I think the wheels of justice land where they need to land, one way or another.
And we're going to do it. This is what this podcast is about. The biggest thing with this podcast is this is something we've been trying to do. When Mike passed, we've done podcasts together, but this is Brotherhood, man. This is a podcast where we're talking about life change, brotherhood, and everything that happens in between. You're going to hear us laugh on this podcast. You're going to hear us disagree. We're going to tell you stories I need to hear too, because I might have forgot some. But we're going to talk about the things we've learned, the things we got wrong, the things we're still trying to figure out. And yes, we're going to talk about our brothers, all four of us, because we're still four. Because Michael was more than what just happened to Michael. Chip was more than what happened to Chip. Their lives deserve to be remembered, not just their deaths. So when you see two brothers sitting at the table, understand something. There are four brothers in the story. Two of us are here to tell it. Two of us live through the stories we tell. Life changed, our family changed, we changed, but brotherhood did. We still four. Two here, two beyond, forever brothers. I'm Joseph. This is my older brother Chris. You got any last words?
Nah, man, but just make the most out of the life you have, right? Life isn't the time you have in it, but it's the amount of time you put in what you.
And this is the Brothers Podcast. We see you in the next episode.
Yeah. Peace out.